a pushy broad from the Bronx, New York. Follow her voice, a straight dog is nice. She's a pushy broad from the Bronx, oh yeah. Don't be surprised if you wanna listen twice. Make decisions, find the right choice. Know yourself better, find your own voice. It's okay if you need help today, cause everybody needs a little push. From the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York.
Welcome, Transformation Network listeners. My name is Ellen Stewart, and I am the pushy broad from the Bronx. Welcome to my show, Recovery Recharged, where we share valuable insights and information from experts in the field of addiction and recovery. Happy New Year. I'm hoping that 2024 will be a good one for you, and I'd like to start the new year off right with a wonderful guest talking about things that are very important to loved ones and families. The name of this show today is called Addiction in the Family, and it is named after a very popular bestseller written by Dr. Louise Stanger. That book, Addiction in the Family, is a book that helps families navigate challenges, emotions, and recovery. I'm extremely fortunate today to have Dr. Louise here with us to do this show, because this is the time of year after all the holidays and all the partying that everybody seems to get down to business. And that means we need help navigating what our next steps are when we are looking at someone that is suffering from the throes of addiction. So, Recovery Recharge is first going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Louise, because it only has to be a little bit, because this woman's resume goes on for about 25 pages, because she is absolutely the number one source in helping families overcome addiction in the family. Dr. Louise has been a licensed clinical social worker for over 35 years. She specializes not only in substance abuse disorders, but process addictions, mental health disorders, sudden death, trauma, grief, and loss. In addition to which, she is a published author not only of the book that we're going to talk about today, but a book about her own personal life called Falling Up, a memoir of renewal, back in 2016, and also The Definitive Guide to Addiction Intervention, which was also published prior to this book. She is known throughout the field for her clinical excellence and her innovative approach to interventions. Recovery Recharge and the Pushy Broad from the Bronx welcomes Dr. Louise. Good morning, doctor. How are you?
Well, good. I feel like I'm the pushy broad from California. And what an honor to be with you. Happy New Year. So glad to be part of your show.
Thank you so much. I am so glad that you are a part of my show. It is the first kickoff of 2024 for me, and I could not have had a more prestigious host. I have been a fan of yours forever. Thank you so much for gracing our program today. So, first of all, I want to ask you a personal question, because that's what we do here. I'm glad that you said you're a pushy broad, because I definitely defined you as one, no question. Addiction in the Family, an amazing book, very easy read, gets into a lot of things, and it came from a personal place, didn't it?
Oh, most definitely. I was born, as you can imagine, on a fault line of trauma, experiencing 5 sudden deaths in my lifetime. My own father died by the brain disease of suicide. My mother had a substance use disorder, and mental health and other types of things just danced around me like cherubs or the rainbows that you did not want. And so I have very much firsthand experience of what it's like to grow up in a family beset with mental health, substance abuse, and sudden death. And I was lucky enough to have scaffolding around me that allowed me to grow and thrive.
In what form? What form did the scaffolding take?
Well, I think it started at a very young age with a wonderful social worker by the name of Dr. Leon Rubenstein. After my father died by suicide, I was sent to a camp, Camp Wood Echo, where I had a safe passage or a safe way of being able to begin to deal with grief and loss, and also had the opportunity to be a kid. shoot bows and arrows. I guess I wrote an article about that this year that was published across the world. Be able to understand that I am a good person, that this was not anything that I could have prevented or controlled, but I could learn how to do other things to help take care of myself and others.
And then into your foray into undergrad and then grad, you had some mentors along the way and decided to focus on mental health, correct?
Yes, I've had along the way, I've been really blessed. I think it was the sociologist Andrew Billingsley that wrote about screens of opportunity. And as a young, very confused, I'm not too sure I want to be in college. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and first I had wonderful mentors that were actually Mellon professors that taught me how to write sentences and pencil whipped. Then I had wonderful mentors that said you could be anything you wanted to be and helped me. I had to earn my way through college. I worked at an Irene Kaufman Center, which was a center for young people, and was surrounded by social workers. I never really realized they were, but they helped me set me on my trajectory of what do I want to do when I grow up.
And then you moved out to California?
Yeah, I moved out to California at the ripe old age of 20 when I married my first husband, who's deceased now. And he was a dentist. In those days, you got your training by going into the Navy. But as a caveat, I thought I had worked for Allegheny County Department of Public Welfare. And that was the time when Martin was alive, and my March for Martin died. And I thought I was going to get a job at the Urban League, but that was not the time or the place. There was a lot of turmoil after Martin died, a lot of Black, and I was supposed to be a lawyer, but I couldn't find the law school. So I decided to go to a brand new school of social work at what was then San Diego State College, and had the most wonderful mentor in the world, Dr. Gleno Hayworth, who allowed me the opportunity to say that everybody was authentic and to start weaving stories about people, which is really what I do today. Listen to families and their stories.
That's so interesting because even back then, and you're a woman of my own heart and also my own generation, you talk about authenticity. And I just read the other day that Webster's coined the word authentic as the buzzword for 2023. We're still waiting to see what the buzzword is for 24. But nevertheless, we also came from a time where we really had to be ourselves, right? And the est movement and all of those things made us self-reflect. And at the time, yoga and meditation were maybe just on the rise in the United States. So this was something that we lend ourselves to. So you decided over the years to go into social work after declining certain other professions for geographic and political reasons, whatever the time was. And how did you begin to focus on specifically addiction, the family, and intervention? Where did that come from?
It's a great story. I was a young graduate student who wrote well, so I got invited right away to teach at San Diego State College. And at the time, everybody was really interested in mental health. Mental health was the cool thing. Nobody really paid attention to substance use, except for the fact that in the 80s, all of a sudden, college campuses were taken by surprise by Playboy magazine. And Playboy magazine was taking a look at all the party schools and what happened with all the red cups and partying. And San Diego State, there were two things that was named the #1 party school in the nation. And that's actually where I was working. And at the same time, schools of social work and marriage, family, psychology, they said, maybe we should have a class in substance abuse or alcohol and other drugs. They really didn't even know how to call it correctly. And at the third intersection was the Department of Education was starting to give out money, grants, programmatic grants to reduce high-risk problematic college problems on college campuses.
I see.
I was lucky enough to be at the right place at the right time. I was pretty good at getting money, and I was invited to create the first graduate seminar in alcohol and other drugs. and is it okay if I continue? Because this is how.
Yes, go ahead.
And so at that time, just putting it in history, because we got history, this is when Betty Ford was just starting. Okay, Mrs. Ford was starting Betty Ford over in Palm Desert. San Diego was on the way to the desert.
Yes.
And we would bring in, we really didn't know what we were doing, but we would bring in guest lecturers or guest speakers and have them talk about a variety of different things and creating, I was just crafting a curriculum. But into my classroom one day came a very tall and stately gentleman. I'm not very tall. His name was Dr. Frank Picard. And he had been a pastor, but at that time he was the director of a behavioral health program called Springbrook in Oregon. He had been best friends with a gentleman named Vern Johnson, who anybody who knows about intervention, he was the granddaddy of intervention. He was a doctor. He wrote a book, I'll Quit Tomorrow. Well, like many of us, Dr. Picard said, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And so he wrote a book called Family Intervention. And you have to remember, I was a social worker and I really, I was great in crisis. You give me sudden death, grief and loss, I worked in the ER, but I wasn't as well versed in addiction in the family, even though I lived that. And so Dr. Picard came in my classroom and he started sharing his book. And literally, I have no idea what happened with my students. I didn't even care. I was mesmerized. He was describing my family. He was describing things I knew. Plus, I said, I'm so great in crisis. I can do this. I can invite people to change. And in those days, it was the old way of doing it. And Dr. Picard, actually, I was lucky enough to have him be my mentor. And that is how I learned about interventions, not from any of the courses that they say they offer. In fact, I won't teach a course because I will coach you if you're well versed, but just to anoint you, an interventionist makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm still a little bit of an egotist when it comes to that.
So this is something that really inspired you. One mentor sometimes does it. For me, just as an aside, on the other end of the spectrum, I went into a Narcotics Anonymous meeting quickly, just totally by accident, because I was going into Naranon because of somebody that I knew who was struggling. I went into a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. They started talking and the light bulb came over my head. And I said to myself, oh my God, this is me. Oh my God, this is totally me. I didn't read anything. Nobody told me anything, but I just started to hear, and this wave comes over you. And all of a sudden, you know where you're supposed to be, right?
Yeah. And what I love about those are we call them God shots.
Yes.
They come and you just grasp it and it's just such a blessing.
And you wait for it and it comes to you. So years later, you have an illustrious career, and we're going to talk about your style of interventions, but I want to come back to this book for a moment because I want you really to help us knock down some of the myths that we have about addiction. And some of these we know, but some of these we need to relearn. And you do this right in the beginning of your book. So I know it has a sense of prominence. So let's go through a couple of them, and I need you to tell me how you feel about it and what the myth is all about. First of all, what everybody thinks, addiction can't happen to me or my family. How do you feel about that?
I think that's one of the funniest statements in the world. The latest stat is 1 out of every 3 people in the United States know someone or have a family member that experiences a substance abuse and or a mental health disorder. And it used to be, and so it's a misnomer that it can't happen to you or that isn't in your family history or you don't know someone.
I always think that it's less than 2 degrees of separation.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely.
Right? Less than 2 degrees. Okay. And this one I love because this comes from everybody that doesn't understand any kind of addiction, right? I love this one. Addiction is just a lack of willpower. What do you think?
Oh my God, that is like the most ridiculous statement in the world. Addiction, as we know it, is a brain disease. Also, suicide is a brain disease. I want to make clear that to the reader, to the listeners of your program. Addiction changes the neurochemistry of your brain. And really, if you want to look to the best definition there is, the American Medical Society has the best definition, but it changes how you interact, people, places, things, thoughts, feelings, actions, and it actually changes your brain chemistry. The beauty about recovery is the brain has what we call neuroplasticity. So there's possibility, and you can regain that which you lost for the most part, unless there's something else that has happened. But addiction in and of itself is a disease, and people see it as people have seen it as a moral failing. And if it was just that easy, it's not. And so if you look at it, and I think that came from the fact that sometimes people do things that we don't like. They lie, they cheat, they steal, but it's still a disease. And if you can separate the person from the disease and understand that this is treatable, you stand a lot better chance of working with that person, accepting them, and learning also about yourself.
For all of us out there, Dr. Louise is referring to many articles published by the American Society of Addiction Medicine. Their current definition, in part, is that addiction is a chronic chemical brain disorder. Also, understanding that addiction, in the throes of active addiction, and it says this very clearly, the emotional state of a chronic addictive person is to bar none and not care about morals, ethics, people, anything. So when I talk to people that are working with people that are in the throes of addiction, they have to realize that all of the things being done to them, the lying, the cheating, the stealing, is not something that is personal, right? They can't really take it personally.
No, and you have to also understand that that person who's experiencing a substance use disorder, they're violating their own moral stance and their own moral code. So along with that, they have their own shame and guilt, which we tend to not realize, because when the recovery allows a person the opportunity to take a look at what did I do, what did I say, and how do I make amends?
So with that, do we believe as recovery individuals and experts that addiction is treatable?
Yes, I do believe it is treatable. It's a lot of work. It's not something that you can go get a shot and make everything all better. It requires active participation of the individual. It requires scaffolding, a village around you. Part of that is through volunteer self-help groups. There's over 368. Of course, AA is the largest, but it could also mean that you have medication management, because for psychiatry, you have a wellness mentor, you have a recovery coach, you have people around you that allow you and help you thrive. So it takes a village. And you also have to be willing to do the hard work and to grieve your losses, take a hard look at yourself, and begin to engage in the world.
All of my clients understand that recovery work is building blocks, just like you said, very apropos scaffolding. One has to be contingent upon the other, almost like the Jenga game, right? We have to hold all the building blocks together. And I am sitting here personally with 38 years clean and sober. And for me, it is still one day at a time. There's no question. Every single person that comes under my care, I tell them I'm just like you. I just have more tools to make it easier, faster, right? Just to understand what it's like a little faster. All right. So one more thing, because we're experiencing this now, especially after all the partying after the new year. In order for someone to want treatment, they must hit rock bottom. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's a myth. Theoretically, rock bottom means you die. What you have to do is, like I talk about creating a positive crisis in which you have the opportunity to change. And so that's really what interventions are. They're invitations to change, creating a positive crisis. You have to want something, bad enough that that is what you want to do. And you want to be able to do that. So that's very, very different than hitting rock bottom, because rock bottom usually means that you die. And I mean, that's what it means. You're dead.
You die.
You can't change. But what it means is you've experienced enough consequences that it's the pain is there where you're motivated to change. And also you have the opportunity around you where people can help you change. This is not a solitary disease, although sometimes a light bulb goes off in your head. You need a village around you to help you thrive. And your family needs a lot of help. Make no mistake, while we're concentrating on the identified loved one, who's the person that experiences stuff, family also needs to change as well.
Let's talk about that. What do you mean by that? What's the first thing you think they should be doing?
Well, I think that, families come together and it's like this. It's like, I don't know where my brain bowl is. I was going to go get my brain bowl for a second here. I have all these toys. So families are like this. They just act like this. They're all together. Well, and they're used to acting in the same way. It's called like homeostasis. We act the same way, we talk the same way. If somebody gets in trouble, we yell at them. There's an identified scapegoat and all these other kinds of things. However, when we are having an individual and working with a family, it's almost like riding a bicycle backwards. Everybody has to learn how to do something different, because you can't just send an identified loved one, that person, whether they, are in recovery, whether it's through 12-step, whether it's through behavioral healthcare treatment, and not change this system, because they're going to be sent back into a system that doesn't know how to function with someone who isn't considered problematic. So everybody has to take a look at things.
All right. So in the scheme of that, everybody taking a look at things, and we're going to absolutely do a lot more work when we come back from the break about that. But let's just back it up for a moment and talk about the fact that if the family needs to change, do you find that when you're working with families, that's a revelation to them? That they can't believe that they're part of the problem, or they have to learn to speak a new language, or they have to change some things about their behavior? Is that a big surprise to them?
It could be, but I think the way I couch it, it's not a surprise. I say nothing changes till something changes. And 97% of my work is really with family. I'm more or less a family whisperer. And people are calling because they're in pain, because their identified loved one, they've nagged, they've cheated, they've stolen, whatever they've done, and they're not able to change. So let's take a look at what you say and what you do, and let's figure out if there's a way in which your behavior, if we change your behavior, might help change their behavior.
Do you find that you're a family systems person where each of the family members has a specific role in that unit?
I think they all have a specific role. I don't think it's as much, if we're talking, because we know about Sharon Wexler Cruz, she was brilliant, and she said there was a scapegoat, there was a this and that, but people fall in and out of roles. But people do have roles to make other people look better or look good. And unconsciously, there is a payoff to having someone be the problem.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you can see it a lot in siblings. No disrespect to any siblings. If you have a brother or a sister that has a substance abuse problem, you look perfect, and you may not be perfect, but in the scheme of things, you're so good, and you get to go under the radar. When that brother or sister gets better and is in recovery, it changes your role. You're no longer top dog. The same thing with mom and dad. If you have a spouse that is emotionally unavailable because they're using, you get to do whatever you want. But all of a sudden, when you're back together, you have to learn how to be a couple again.
I see. That's very interesting. And that happens all the time. All right. Yeah. So let's get an example from you of a little bit of family conversation. Let's just talk a few minutes, a few seconds about when you first introduce yourself to the family. What are the kinds of things that you want them to know? What's your introduction?
Oh, well, I just tell them that I'm just really honored to meet them and I'm really happy. And what I do though is I start out with doing a family map. I invite each one of them to be interviewed individually because I want to hear their story and hear their voice uncluttered by everybody else. And I'm sort of infamous. It was in my textbook for drawing out these family maps with about 18 colored pens. I could run over and show you one and it would look like the ravings of a mad woman, but really getting their story and learning about their history, because one of the things you find are intergenerational patterns. The other thing is it allows me as a clinician interventionist to align with them because their voice is really important. And I can also click off in my head what I learned. So I interview everybody individually in the family before I ever put anybody together. And find out, if we're talking about doing an intervention, then, it's what's special about your loved one, what makes your heart hurt, and what are some of the things you'd like to eat. But in the meantime, I want to learn about you because that's going to tell me so much about how this will work and how this won't work.
Before we continue with your own method of invitational interviewing, please tell us really quickly where we can find you, your website.
Oh, hi. You can go to All About Interventions, www.allaboutinterventions.com. You can call me at 619-507-1699. I actually pick up my own phone. And you'll see that I have tons of articles. I have over 500 blogs. And this past month, I guess I've been in Forbes, LA Weekly, a lot of different things. Because instead of writing books now, I just love writing these short things that get out faster and quicker.
And we're going to talk about those and more when we come back with Dr. Louise. This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx. My show is Recovery Recharged, and we'll be right back.
She's the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York. Follow her voice, a straight dog is nice. She's the pushy broad from the Bronx, oh yeah. Don't be surprised. She's the pushy broad from the Bronx, New York. Follow her voice, a straight dog is nice. She's the pushy broad from the Bronx, oh yeah. Don't be surprised.
Welcome back. This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx. My show, Recovery Recharged, the beginning of its 5th year with Transformation Talk Network. I'm totally thrilled. I am so delighted to be here with Dr. Pat and the gang. Happy New Year to all. If you want to reach me and have a free consultation, please go to my website, Pushy Broad from the Bronx, or call my 800 number, 800-889-1757. Like Dr. Louise, I will pick up my phone and I will answer you and get you help. We are talking with Dr. Louise Stanger, who is an expert in addiction in the family, her book, and also a world-renowned author and family interventionist. Again, Dr. Louise, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. What a great way to start the new year.
Yes, wonderful way. In the book, I want to focus on something in particular. First of all, again, go to Amazon. This is a great Christmas book, Addiction in the Family, helping families navigate challenges, emotions, and recovery. Extremely important. One of the things you talk about is that you address the fact that parents absolve themselves of the responsibility of their loved one's abuse, whether it's their child's abuse or, they turn around and say, it's you, it's not me. Okay. So how do you address that? How do you handle that?
Well, I think it's by taking a look at what people are saying, what people are doing, and changing the languaging of what they say or do, and then taking a look at what are the factors. If you give, sometimes we work with a highly entitled population, or a population that was besieged by COVID, where everybody was afraid to even set limits and boundaries, especially with the younger people. Failure to launch is rampant. And it seems like, as parents, we want to give everybody that which we did not have. And in doing so, we forgot how to set boundaries. And then pot smoking becomes normative in a behavior in a home, and it takes over the home, and people don't know what to say or what to do. And they don't know how to set boundaries, and they don't realize, especially with young adults, that they're actually financially supporting them. Or sometimes with a 40-year-old, they don't remember that they're actually financially supporting them. And so, and people are really good at yelling, screaming, nagging, and pleading, but it's really, what do I say and what do I do? And really being able to talk in non-judgmental terms and begin to set what I say are healthy boundaries, healthy limits. And the mantra, if there's any mantra, is I love you and I care about you, and I'm only going to support you in health and wellness.
Yes. And that's interesting because sometimes parents themselves can't define their own health and wellness. I love that. What did you say? Begging, pleading,
Nagging, scolding,
nagging,
going
scolding.
down Martyrdom
Right.
Lane, and Pity Path Alley, and Perpetrator Highway.
That
And
sounds like phrases of a Bruce Springsteen song.
well, maybe Bruce would like to help. I can help him record one. I don't know.
That's well, okay. So we have a lot of big don'ts for the family, okay? And you list them in your book. Can we go through some of them? You start with do not let yourself get into begging, preaching, nagging, or cajoling, right? Do not threaten or hold hostage or negotiate.
That's right.
Give me an example of one of those things based on what you know.
Well, if you beg someone to go do something, they're liable not to do it, but say, I love you and I care about you. I can only support you in health and wellness. And you can there's 5 magic words I have. Okay. They're so yes, no, really, oh, and whatever. Yes can mean no. Yes, I'm not able to pay your rent this month. Yes, I am not, yes, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, and E. You don't need to use no to be no. You can use yes. But what are the rules and what are the roads? And how do you end up looking the other way? I mean, I've had mothers with even 40-year-olds who say, well, I can't really throw them out. And I can't really ask them to leave. Where will they go? And I go, well, I think they're smart enough to learn how to get drugs. Or probably the worst offender, I'm sorry, is cell phones. Parents pay for cell phones. The cell phone is a direct dial to their drug dealer. And it's not a direct dial to the parent. Yet parents feel that if they don't pay for that cell phone, they cannot find their child. But they can, because as soon as they run out of money, they need to go back to the source of the money. So, but I always have, that's one of the hardest things I have when I'm working with parents is cutting off a phone. Because it's like cutting off a lifeline. But you have to ask them, you say, well, how many times have they called you? Oh, they don't call you. Oh, golly,
Right.
And
It's their preoccupation of putting on that GPS 360 and having their child at least be located in their brain. Okay, my child is over here, even if they're at a corner someplace scoring drugs, at least I know where they are. Right. They're still alive. So most parents say to me that are codependent, and that's a key word that we've used for the past couple of decades in recovery. But most parents who are codependents turn around and say to me, if I don't help them, I don't think they will survive, or I'm afraid I won't be there to catch them. And that's the time that they will have a nervous breakdown or die. How do you respond to that?
I do reflective listening. And so I say, so if I hear you correctly, if you're not there to be the lifeguard, to save your drowning son or daughter, that they will die. But how's that really working for you? How's that really work for you? When does that work? Or what opportunity can you give them? Have they been successful in other things? Because some of these kids have graduated college, some of them have graduated high school. How have you been able, and what would be, how can we help them grow? Otherwise, do you really want to have someone who's with you forever and you're 80 and you're still taking care of them? How's that work for you? I
Yeah.
think I also use a little bit of sense of humor and take a look. But parents are really frightened if they don't help them. That's something bad. I said, well, it seems to me they got arrested. It seems to me they wrecked the car. They ran it around. They walk around your backyard nude. They've had parties. I don't know that your rescuing is really working.
Right, exactly. And all of the ones that are even more serious, the ones that are ending up in hospitals, they're ending up in jail, they are ending up in dangerous situation, they're being arrested. All of these things do not constitute taking good care of your child.
And also not running and getting a bailout with a lawyer. Sometimes the most successful invitations to change happen on the courtyard steps. Sometimes, hospitals are a gift, because from a hospital, it's really, if you know what you're doing, because I coach a lot of families, you can get someone who may need a behavioral health care treatment there, and the hospital can help you. They're not your foes. I mean, people are saying, well, I'm so afraid to call in California, we have what's called 5150s. You have something else, but these are gifts. These are actually gifts you give your child or your loved one so they could be able to survive, that they can be learned, and that you learn how you can do things a little bit differently. Well, a long time ago, and you and I are both the same age, a social worker named Anne once said to me, Louise, you did the best you could do with the resources you have, and now you might try to learn something different. So I always give families I work with no fault insurance. I do believe that, like this rose that I just put on for you, you've done the best you can do with the resources you have. Now, let's try and do something a little bit differently. We can do so many different things. We can do treatment without walls. We can help them go to a behavioral health. We can give you a lot of coaching, because actually, as families, you don't get all the help that your loved one gets, and you're worthy of that too.
And because we are learning so much, and because we've come a very, very long way from where Betty Ford was the one accepted treatment center in the country. And there are so many other treatment centers to work with on both sides of the fence, right? For the one who is suffering and for the family who is suffering. There's no such thing as I don't know where to go or I don't know how to get help.
No, and what I really pride myself on is I'm not related to any behavioral health care center in the country. And ethically, if you ever work with someone, they should give you three. They should do due diligence. They should do what's called a retrospective biopsychosocial. They should learn about your identified loved one. They should learn about also what your capabilities are, because finances do take a part. And then they should say, in a perfect world, these are three places I'd like to invite you to talk to. Connect you with them. You also have gotten to do the due diligence and talk to those three places. And then you tell me which one is best for your child, or your adult, or your husband, or your wife. And that way, people have a say in it. And the other thing you want, there's all kinds of things for families when it comes time for treatment. I mean, they need progress only consent forms, which means they are allowed to know. I always follow, because you're trying to create scaffolding. It's one thing for a person to be, as you well know, with 39 years of recovery, being in a behavioral health care center. There's another thing for the scaffolding you must have to when you come out, whether you need a wellness mentor, whether you need a psychiatrist, whatever it is you need, plus the family needs support too.
I always liken it to being in school. If you go take a course and you've learned a new language, like the language of recovery, and you come out of treatment, if you don't keep practicing that language, you will lose it. You will forget it. You will only remember it sporadically. And that's exactly why I became a recovery coach, because putting people into treatment, working for major treatment centers across the country for 12 years, I decided that after that time was when somebody needed the most help, right? It's like going to school, going to summer school, and then forgetting everything that's happened, right?
And that's why I do such an exciting new thing, which is treatment without walls, especially for the younger population.
Tell us about that.
Well, I work as the director of family programming for a company called Youth Prevention Mentors. And the N is from about 11 to about 29. And the notion is that you need to change the entire system. And and it can be done pre-behavioral health, or it can be done without behavioral health intervention inside a treatment center. But what you're doing is you're creating treatment without walls and creating that scaffolding that you spoke about with wellness, but you're doing it by working with having a wellness mentor, and that's someone else who's faced adversity that you attach with the identified loved one. I tend to work as the family whisperer. We have a psychiatrist that's pretty global that works with that and really change the entire system. It's a slower process, but it is so exciting. And what's exciting to me is if I go back to my college days, I held 2 major NIH and IAAA grants. I hope this doesn't bore you. The first one was called Student to Student, which was a peer mentoring program, which took high risk, very high risk students to start with that had been in and out of prison and were matriculating onto the university. It transposed into the cool kids, the sorority and fraternity, and they were to mentor their partners to reduce risk. The second one, or the last large grant I held, was an NIH and IAAA grant, which was a parent-based intervention to reduce problematic behaviors. These two combined today are exciting because they make for youth prevention mentors.
So if somebody wants to be a part of Treatment Without Walls, how can they do that?
Well, they can contact me. They can also, there's another website. It's called Youth Prevention Mentors. They can call there or just pick up the phone again and call me 619-507-1699, and we can talk about that.
Or allaboutInterventions.com, correct?
Both. And so, yeah. And I do a lot of writing. If you go to my website, there's so much writing I have about treatment without walls, about failure to launch, about you name it.
Yes, you're doing a whole bunch of things. I see a whole bunch of articles. You can absolutely subscribe on Dr. Louise's website. She sends wonderful articles that touch every part of addiction and recovery and mental health. So part of your book and the way it is written, you have chapters that say, what should I say? Which is really wonderful because sometimes parents don't know exactly what to say about anything. And the fact that each one of your chapters actually tells somebody what to say, how come you decided to do it that way? I'm curious.
Well, because that's what I do when I'm working with families. Like, you have to be conversational. I mean, you can't expect someone to know, to start. You can say, start with an open heart. Huge non-judgmental sentence was what, and you can say, I realize as a family, I've done a whole bunch of things wrong. I need to make amends for what I did. I gave you money when I shouldn't have been giving you money. I bailed you out. I picked you up. I ran all over town looking for you. You crashed a car and I fixed the car. I threw away bottles when I should have thrown away bottles. I gave you money for marijuana.
I bailed you out of difficult
Yeah.
situations. I helped you do your homework just to graduate so that you wouldn't be falling back. All
Yeah.
of those things. I covered up for you when you lied and said you were sick because you didn't want to go to school. You didn't want to face a job responsibility. All of those things. Yeah.
And then you also have to be empowering to people. You're important to me. You're important to our family. And I believe in you, because people who are really shame-based, you don't need, to that, but I've always known that you are enough and that you can be enough, and that I believe that you're, or I'm confident that you have the resources to do what you need to do. You put the monkey back where it belongs. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that it's okay to feel scared. It's okay to be weak, because I feel that same way too. I don't have all the answers. Um, and the other way is like, I'm not gonna call and keep bailing you out of work. I'm not gonna, I love you and I care about you enough that I'm no longer going to be the excuse provider. you know, um,
And not only that, but people then, and you teach families to take responsibilities for their own actions, talk
yes,
about their own culpabilities and their own human responses to what they have done and how they can improve as individuals. Yeah.
yes, because I think that part of recovery is you being in recovery. I mean, I grew up as an ACA adult, a child of an alcoholic, a child of someone who had mental illness, someone who was a family member. I mean, I have a lot of isms, but where for the grace of God goes you or I. And if I don't work my own program and have my own recovery, and then also, I've always loved counselors. I think they're wonderful, whether they're recovery coaches, that are really good, with that. But we have to be able to take a look at ourselves and do our own inventory and say, what did I do that's helpful? What did I do that's not so helpful? And what do I need to change? And
In
what
this in the spirit of that, and part of your book, let's talk a little bit about the chapters you focus on self-care. Why is it so important?
Well, I think self-care. I invite people to do 9 things each week, or 3 things at least each week, to take care of themselves physically, emotionally, and consistent with their values. So the alphabet is big. And if I was in a classroom, I would go Sunday through Monday, week 1, week 2, week 3. It takes 90 days to change a behavior. So what are you going to do? And people don't even know, family members, for example, have no idea what they do to take care of themselves, because they've been sitting on pins and needles. They haven't they haven't eaten, they haven't done manis, they haven't even done a bubble bath. But if you take the alphabet goes from A to Z, and you can think of things to take care of yourself physically. Go for a walk, do breathing exercises, swim. It depends whether you like to exercise. Whatever it is, get up off of the chair, so to speak. Emotionally, what can you do emotionally? Talk to a friend, go to a meeting, be with a professional. Oh, listen to a funny movie, laugh. People don't laugh when they're so serious about a loved one. They don't even know how to find joy. And then spiritually or consistent with your values. Some people, all of a sudden think that there's something greater than themselves because they were trying to do things all along and it hasn't worked. So going for a walk outside, looking at nature. I mean, this beautiful rose, I have nothing to do with it. It is December in California and it is blooming. What a gift. But if I was a parent or a loved one, I wouldn't even see this rose.
One of the things you talk about in the book is to practice gratitude. Is that something you do personally?
Yes, well, I love so Edmonds is the psychologist who's found out that if you practice gratitude, by meaning that you say 3 things morning and 3 things at night that you're grateful for, it can change your brain chemistry to more optimistic. I myself have a gratitude group that is a very unlikely pair. We never do anything professionally. One is a world famous pain addiction physician in recovery. He's more or less my contemporary. We don't work at any same treatment center. We've never seen each other. The other one is a younger man who has a master's in psychology, but he works as business development for yet another. And every day we have been doing a grateful list for the past 2.5 years. And we started, but also with families, I will start having them do grateful lists, having them, it's best to do it with a partner. And in the beginning, grateful lists are not deep. They really, as you know, Ellen, and invite someone to do a grateful list with someone else, or if they don't have anyone else, just write me every day. It will change the way you can look at the world. Like you can be grateful for a rose that's blooming when you never even could see outside before. It changes your ability for positivity, and it's based from positive psychology. And very much, I'm a strength-based, positive social worker. I'm looking for goodness in people and trying to find goodness in families and helping them change the trajectory of their lives.
Gratitude has been a very powerful word on Recovery Recharged. My last show, my Christmas show, was with Andrew Kapp, who wrote the very famous book, The Last Law of Attraction, book you'll ever need to read, and also the book Just Feel Good, which talks about a plethora of gratitude and something that he also does personally and something that everybody should be a part of. Ever since I got clean and sober, gratitude was something that I practiced every single day because the power of positive energy and positive thought is insurmountable. Because our brains can be rewired. I am a very big proponent of that. So something that is essential in 2024, if you haven't already thought about it, is to practice gratitude. Some of the most world-renowned people, experts like Dr. Louise, is doing it herself. She practices what she preaches, just like the Pushy Broad.
The other
And
thing I wanted to add is practice random kindness.
ah,
I had a wonderful friend, his name was Bill Lane, who's deceased, but Bill, and I did it over holiday. Bill would say that the other way to get out of your head is you practice random kindness. And I did it in the grocery store last week. Like you go to the checkout counter in the grocery store, and if you have you just say to the the lady at the checkout counter, do you have any gift cards? And then they look at you, oh, I have to do a gift card. And then you do that $10 gift card, and then you turn around and say, thank you, because you're the one that's sitting here doing all that. Or you go to Starbucks and the person behind you, you practice random kindness, because it's going to take you, if you are of service, it also takes you out of yourself.
that's marvelous and a really good thing. I'm going to really do that. Dr. Louise, it's been such a pleasure and a privilege to have you today. And I hope you will consider coming back as a regular contributor on my show, Recovery Recharged, in its 5th season. I want the interview on your next book, whenever that comes out. This book, I'd love everybody to get, Addiction in the Family, Helping Families Navigate Challenges, Emotions, and Recovery. Go to allaboutinterventions.com and follow Dr. Louise. She will send you some very helpful tips. It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much from the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. So good to be with you.
This is Ellen Stewart, the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, saying thanks for listening, and remember, everybody needs a little push.
From the Pushy Broad from the Bronx, New